officially welcome everybody to today's event, Women Energize Women, How to Get Investment as a Female Energy Entrepreneur. My name is Geraldine Debastian, and it is my pleasure to moderate the Women Energize Women series, which is part of a communication campaign initiated by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate and implemented by the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit and the German Renewable Energy Federation within the scope of the ministry's bilateral energy partnership and dialogues program. The campaign is really meant to empower, motivate, inform, and inspire women working in the energy sector, in particular in renewable energies, and offer events like today in order to create networking opportunities and introduce you to inspiring role models, females who are already making a huge difference in the energy sector. And today, I'm very thrilled to welcome three experts on the topic of investment. As last time in our last event, we explored different aspects, especially different obstacles that female entrepreneurs are faced with today. And that many of these obstacles really reflect the institutionalized domination of male narratives that we have today in the business world. And this is an obstacle and a hindrance, especially when trying to finance a business, where today women still have notable disadvantages. That is why we chose to bring together different investment experts today to shed some light on the topic of how we can get more finance, more investment going for female entrepreneurs or female-led businesses in the renewable energy sector. And I'm thrilled to welcome today these three speakers, beginning with Teresia Jakova, who's the head of investment relations and education and co-founder of Lumus Investment. Great to have you here with us today.
Hello, thank you.
I'm also very thrilled to welcome Divya Balakrishnan, who's the advisor of GET Invest, a European program that mobilizes investment in renewable energy in developing countries. Welcome, Divya.
Thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much for joining. And I'm also thrilled to welcome Ekaterina Grachieva, who's the lead finance officer of the Climate Investment Fund. Hello, Ekaterina.
Great to be here.
So just one more word on the format. As I mentioned, this is really meant as a space for you to learn about best practices, about useful tips and do's and don'ts, and to ask your questions. So after about 30 minutes latest, we'll be opening the floor for your questions and comments. You can ask them via the chat or come in with your audio and camera, and we look forward to hearing from all of you as well. Also, please feel free to use the chat in case you have any technical problems. My colleagues will be kind enough to assist you and offer some advice. So to begin with, maybe not everybody who's joining today's session is quite familiar with the different funding programs or funds that you're involved in. So I would like to offer the floor to each of you to share a little bit more information about what it is that your different organizations do in this field. And maybe I can start with you, Teresia, and invite you to introduce to us Lumus Investment, what brought you to found this organization, and how you're trying to support and especially connect women with investment opportunities.
Hi everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Lumus is pretty young, I must say. It's about 2 years that we are officially functioning. There were, of course, many months and years of that led to this activity, but Lumus is an investment club for female investors. So it's an investment club for women who want to start angel investing or who are already angel investors. So it's for both experienced angels and unexperienced angels. We naturally have more unexperienced angels, women who actually want to start learning how to invest, who want to invest into startups, technology startups, or early stage companies, specifically in Central and Eastern Europe. That's where we are operating, where most of our networks come from. So we provide these women with investment opportunities, first of all. So we actually source startups and very exciting companies that they would normally have hard times to see or get to. And then we present them with the investment opportunity, and they can decide whether they want to invest or not. And on the way, how they're investing, we're actually educating them. So we provide a lot of education for these women on the way. So our mission is that once in their life they would be able to invest without us, without Lumos. So they would actually know how to invest themselves, invest in companies they like or they want to support. So this would be Lumos in a nutshell. We have about 300 women in our network, in our investment club at the moment, with different professional backgrounds. Not necessarily or not at all with finance background. Actually, really women that just want to diversify their portfolio or their personal wealth, or they want to diversify their savings. So this is Lumos.
Okay, great. Let me just check if I got it all, because I think this is so important to have networking initiatives like that, connecting people, especially if you're not yet an expert in finance or investment, but perhaps you want to become one. So say a woman is listening who would like to become an angel investor in the renewable energy sector, then they could reach out to you and you would help to build connections to possible companies looking for their support.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. I hope some people are already taking notes.
Perfect. Yeah, these women, they can say like, I only want to invest in energy, or indeed in renewable energy, or in health tech, or whatever field. We are sector agnostic, so I don't promise you that there will be 2 energy companies that you can invest this year or in the upcoming 5 years. But you can definitely select to only invest in this specific field.
Okay, great. And later on, I would love to learn more about how you do this matchmaking and build up your networks, but let's get to that in a minute. Divya, I would like to invite you next to explain a little bit more about the work of GT Invest and how you try to also perhaps create these connections globally with developing countries and investment needs and opportunities there and Europe.
Sure, thanks. So first of all, it's Get Invest for all those who are listening in. And as mentioned earlier, it's a European program, but it's implemented by GIZ. And what we do is we support clean energy projects and companies, specifically in accessing finance. And we work in Sub-Saharan Africa, Pacific, and Caribbean regions. So investment readiness is exactly what Get Invest prepares companies and projects for. So any company that approaches a financier goes through this thorough due diligence process, for which a sound business case, a financial model, which is clear, convincing, well articulated, is key, right? And you also need to present it speaking the language that your audience, the investors, relate to. For instance, if you delve into too much technical information, you've lost your audience, right? You also need to conform to formal investment standards, put in place your legal formalities, all the prerequisites of setting up a business in your country, any compliance requirements, all of this needs to be in place before you actually go and approach your investor. So this might sound overwhelming, but the good news is that you do not need to do all of this on your own. Irrespective of the gender that we are, everybody needs help. So putting it out there, right? So find yourself a professional service provider who can help you, or if unaffordable, find yourself a Get Invest where such services are enabled at no cost. Now, Get Invest has 2 services, one being the Finance Catalyst, which is for more later stage companies and projects. The Get Invest Finance Catalyst has till date enabled around 84 companies to be accepted for financiers intake. And approximately 50 of these have already received an estimated investment of approximately 499 million euros. Now, what this facility does is it specifically enables companies access to finance by, one, helping them prepare their documentation, be the pitch deck, financial model, whatever it may be, prepare them, get them ready to be submitted to investors. Then also prepare the management for all the women entrepreneurs here who are listening in. Prepare them to be able to face investors. And then they also help you identify what is the right blend of finance that your company can absorb or would benefit your company at this stage. And then the advisors also help you identify which financiers those are and basically help you get in touch with them and formally introduce you with these financiers. The second service of Get Invest, which is a more new service and is designed very specifically for locally owned companies, and more earlier stage companies. Basically provides an additional advisory, which on top of the already described access to finance advisory, also helps these companies get their business processes in place, be it credit risk management, be it data infrastructure. So all of this in total makes the investor confident in investing in you. They know that you have your ABCD in place, so they're more comfortable in investing in you. So that's basically what GetInvest does. And what we do have in place is an extensive funding database, which is available on the GetInvest website, that can be also accessed by anyone on here. You can actually decide based on the ticket size you're looking for, or the geographies, or the type of investment that you're looking for. So you can actually filter it according to your needs, and then you have a list of different investors that you can actually go and approach and and basically ask for investment. So that's something we already have in place if you want to go on your own. But then if you need support in getting yourself prepared for investment, then happy to be of service.
Thank you. Will be interesting to find out a little bit more about the nature of what lives in that database and what gaps perhaps exist. So let's get to that in a minute. But first of all, Ekaterina, if you can introduce to us the work of the Climate Investment Fund in a bit more detail, and yes, what role in this investment space that you play.
Great, and I'm in awe of listening to the other speakers, and I was just listening that when I entered financial industry 20 years ago, there was nowhere near this kinds of opportunities to learn and to network and to get connected, and particularly in the last couple of years where these connections have become so easy and such a low transaction cost into entry. I think this is just such a golden time for this type of sort of opportunities, and I think I'm glad to be part of this conversation. We are quite different climate investment funds from the two initiatives you've just listened about. We have been established by the G8 in 2008 as the first and one of the largest multilateral climate investment funds. We are now relying on deploying 10 billion of public capital into developing countries, middle income and low income countries. And our objectives is to mobilize and bring in more funding. We're concessional funding. So what we do is we make our funding deployed in different areas of energy transition, renewable energy integration, accelerated coal transition. We're going to be opening a nature program in such a way that it can attract other capital from other contributors. So $1 of CIF capital mobilizes about 10 billion of other capital from private sector, from bilateral, from sovereigns as well. And our objective is to scale up what's available for countries in the frontier markets, in the frontier technologies, and to prove demonstration effect so that the markets can open up and the funds would be able to follow, so that this is unlocking not only technology, but capital markets for countries where they're perhaps not as developed as in other middle income, upper middle income, and developed countries. So we are running about 300 projects across 70 countries, present across all of the developing space and frontier space. We are growing. We got new programs approved at the last COP. We are getting additional contributions from our shareholders, the governments, the G7, plus other. Germany has been a great partner to us as well. Our projects 3/4 of it are very large scale public sector projects, and quarter is we working with the private sector. We are also trying to figure out how to engage more with the smaller projects, though this is not our main business line. Yet when we are implementing our projects, we are very mindful about gender aspect of project design and project implementation. That's one of our important priorities as we invest and engage in the countries. I'll hand it back over for the conversation.
Thank you. Allow me a follow-up question, Ekaterina, because you kindly offered the information that you have a wealth of experience working in the sector and have perhaps also the benefit of seeing what has changed over time. So, of course, it's very encouraging to hear from your perspective that things are changing. We have a more diversified scene and a more diversified set of organizations addressing female funding needs. Maybe from your also, let's say, quite macro level perspective, how do you feel that the gender representation is or has changed in your specific line of work?
Oh, it's huge, and maybe allow me not to share it not from the perspective of the fund, but from my own professional perspective. And in fact, my degree, I'm a original degree, I'm a doctorate in applied mathematics, and that's what brought me into the financial industry. And when I was invited to join World Bank Treasury as a quant, I said, well, I don't know anything about finance, but they said finance is easier to be taught to a mathematician than the other way around. That was my entry into the very quantitative area. And then for the next 15 plus years, I often was the only female in the team. I was as a quant, as I evolved to different areas, it would be me and gentlemen. I thought this was just the rules of the games. I don't remember hearing a lot of gender-focused narratives, and I thought for me to succeed and my choice of the career was driven very much, well, this is what the game is. This is what it takes to succeed. So let me work my butt off so that I can do well. And only when I started getting into the area of sustainable finance and climate finance over the last 3 years is when I found myself in a lot more diverse team. My current team at the Climate Investment Fund is very well represented. And in fact, if anything, I would say our women are even more vocal women that drive quite a lot of discussions and project design and implementation. So I can see that this has become very different and very quickly. And I would say that change accelerated in the last 5 years, I would say. So it was building up to it, but I think we've come to the tipping point where that becomes front and center in the discussions, and I hope it will bring necessary changes.
That's really encouraging to hear, and I think a great kickoff to our conversation now. In particular, as we have had a few of our previous sessions on the topic of gender mainstreaming, and it's great to hear that this has happened for the climate investment funds. So, Divya, maybe I can get back to you as you were explaining. You have this funding database and connect the funders that you have there with the respective funding needs. So I would be very interested to hear what gaps you currently detect there. Do you feel that you have a match for everybody who sort of turns to you looking for funding, or in particular from the perspective of female entrepreneurs, female funders, female seekers for funding, what gaps do you currently see?
Right. So first of all, at the outset, I'd like to congratulate all the women here for their roles as professionals, entrepreneurs, be it as it may. And at this point, I would like to highlight that our gender is really not relevant to what we do today, right? So you're not a woman entrepreneur, but you're an entrepreneur. So similarly, when approaching a financier, Do not let gender be your concern. So this is something we keep at the back of our mind. I would go one step further and say, pretend that it doesn't even exist, because if you're professional and you're well prepared and you put your best foot forward, you don't need specifically a woman's fund to fund you, right? If you get all your things in order, then the investor will have to think twice about not investing in you. So while there are funding calls specific to women entrepreneurs and investors, I can name a few like the Seema Angaza Finance Fund, the Growfen Alpha Mundi Foundation, BGFA, etc. I would urge you to approach this entirely differently, right? Because as of today, many DFIs and also foundations are part of the 2X challenge for gender lens investing. This means that while they do not specifically only fund women entrepreneurs, investing in women is one of their targets. So 30% of their investments, it can be more, but a minimum of 30% needs to meet the 2X criteria. And what is this 2X criteria? It's a criteria to determine if a company is actually either women owned or managed by women, or if their products are specifically directed towards the benefit of women, etc., etc. This information is available online, and I would really urge everybody looking for funding here not to limit yourself to only the, if you Google, you can find, funds that are specific for women, but there are a lot more funds there that don't invest only in women, that they also gain benefit from investing in women. So let's get the idea outside our heads that as entrepreneurs, be it male or female, we need to beg for finance, because that's not true. The investors, they need to spend money, and they need to spend money in the right way on the right companies. So in a sense, you are their client, and hence, it's a two-way street here. So just keep that at the back of your mind whenever you plan to approach investors.
Yeah, and I think that's important also for the mindset of how to approach things. So I think there was a lot of nodding also as you were speaking now, Divya, to the sentiment you raised. However, at the same time, of course, we have these huge funding barriers. So I can only say the statistics for the EU that are still so stark, with hardly any of the available startup investment. This is not specific to the energy sector, going to male-only teams. I think in Eastern Europe, I recently read in at least 2020 was just 1% of funding going to female founders. So a scary number. And how do we deal with that stark imbalance whilst at the same time embracing the mindset you just shared? Teresa, you were nodding along. Maybe I can ask you to comment how this is something that you're also trying to address with your work.
Yes, that's right. Actually, I completely agree with what you're saying, Divya, and that's really important to always remind to all female entrepreneurs to go and fundraise from all funds that are suitable for your company, whether it's sector or stage or it's we are a female angel investor club, and we often do get approached by female entrepreneurs. I think it naturally goes that they just feel less barrier. But the truth is that we do not only invest in female entrepreneurs, and we just repeat it every single time that our side of the coin is to bring more female investors into the investment world. But that doesn't mean we are only going to invest in companies that are founded or run by women. We do invest in mixed teams or male-founded teams. As I said, naturally, we do attract a lot more female entrepreneurs, as they say, like they feel less barrier, or it often works in a way that it's maybe a former colleague that introduced you, etc. Somehow, like it works with these connections. But out of 6 investments we've done, there is 2 of them that are founded by women. The rest is mixed teams or founded by men. As you said, Geraldine, only 1% goes to female entrepreneurs here in Central and Eastern Europe. It's crazy. It's terrible statistics. When I talk to these female entrepreneurs, what often happens is that Women entrepreneurs have more tendency to work with their savings or with other sources than external financing. I think it has to do with risk aversity. Sometimes they just feel that, I would rather work with something I have already saved or I have, or it's like somehow secure than taking someone else money, and then promising the returns or, paying back. It's good in a way, it's not good in a way. Of course, you always have to consider whether you need the external investment, like what stage you should actually ask for external financing, or but definitely we do see that female entrepreneurs are more hesitant to actually go and fundraise from funds. And what often happens is that us as investors, we have to motivate these women to actually go and fundraise, because we believe that their business is great, that with external fundraise, with external finance, their acceleration can be much better, much faster. They can grow the company at a much faster rate. And what happens is that when you grow faster, you are earlier than your competitor. So sometimes you have two companies, one gets funding, another one doesn't get funding, and it's only about your time to the market. So you can be much quicker if you get external financing, and then get larger piece of pie on the market, get your customers quicker. So you have to consider this, even though, as I said, you often have to consider whether it's the right time or not to get the funding. But don't be afraid, and just go and list yourself all the funds that are investing in companies in your sector, or that have invested in companies that are similar to you, or stages of your development stage. There is a lot of capital and money out there now on the market. As Divya said, the investors do need to invest the money. We have other investors who want to spend their money, who want to make profit. So I don't really think there was any better time to raise money than now, because there is certainly, a lot of, I would say, positive PR, plus there is a lot of money on the market that can be spent into venture and into early stage companies. It's about choosing the right investor and approaching the right investor.
Sounds very promising. That apparently, the traction is there and the sort of scenes are set, and now it's about connecting the dots mostly. However, of course, there are generally also still other structural barriers. Maybe we'll get to those in a minute, but Divya, you just raised your hand. Did you want to comment on what Teresa said?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what she just mentioned. This is indeed the best time to be raising finance, because the sector is opening up in many ways, more than one, especially in the energy industry, the clean energy industry. Additionally, like I mentioned, the awareness is at different levels, right? People are very well aware that there is only this 1% that's going into Central or Eastern Europe, for instance. I can also quote from an African Development Bank. There was a press release where they mentioned that women entrepreneurs or women-owned companies are seen as more risk-free in comparison to male-owned companies. So they were also urging investors to consider investing in women-owned companies, because the possibility of getting an ROI is much higher in that case. So it's opening up, the market is opening up, and we from Get Invest, we do engage in a few initiatives when we can. So for instance, the second service that I mentioned, the finance readiness support, in our application, in the submission process, we specifically check what is the kind of ownership in the companies that we're receiving applications for. And for instance, in the first cohort, so it's just had one cohort so far, and in the first cohort, we already have 2/3 of the companies are owned or led by women. So while we are not proactively or consciously trying to engage in more gender mainstreaming, we are very aware that women are kind of also stepping up in their own ways out there. And we're much more excited to give a go ahead to a women-owned or women-led company than not. So just to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. Ekaterina.
I think what struck me when I was listening to Teresa is the comment in particular that women are themselves who holding themselves back. That there is quite often they're holding back from fundraising rather than it's the structural challenges that prevent them from doing it. And in my career, even though it has been in male-dominated environment, I never felt gender discriminated. If you have a great offer, if you offer the great skills, gender is not an issue. And I guess what's perhaps is, and I think that's what Divya said in her opening, I probably one of the focus needs of the discussion of the conversation needs to be of what's holding women back and start unpacking those internal barriers, not external barriers. I see them as more preventing women success and in the industry than external barriers. I think we all know how to deal with external barriers, but dealing with different team members on my team, I realize what's happening inside of each individual perhaps is a much bigger predictor of how well they will do and how willing they will be to put themselves on the line, to be uncomfortable in stretching their comfort zone. And I think that's probably the biggest change that needs to happen in this space.
Before we perhaps go into that, because I would like to hear from Teresa how her experience is regarding perhaps these internal barriers. You just put it, Ekaterina, versus the external ones. Can you just share with us quickly, what would be your hope, how these things connect? If you hear the kind of work Teresa is doing and the kind of connections that Divya is building through her work, you said in your opening remarks, you're not yet structurally, this is not how your work is to connect with small scale entrepreneurs and startups necessarily, but looking at some of the countries that you're active in, what would be your vision or your hope for how your work connects to some of the work that is being done from these smaller enterprises or more grassroots initiatives in the next, say, 5 years? Oh, sorry, that was to Ekaterina, just as a follow-up question.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was okay. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, how do you mind repeating the question then?
No, not at all. Sorry, I was just wondering because you said in the beginning, of course, you're working on this larger scale level and not connecting with entrepreneurs or founders. But now, having heard about how Teresa is working and connecting investors and entrepreneurs, how Divya is shaping these connections between investors and organizations, what is your hope looking into the future? How the work that you're doing, in particular in the developing countries you're active in, will connect to this more grassroots level or the more entrepreneurial level, say in the next 5 years?
Right. And maybe this is my bias because gender has not been my my focus, right, all this time. And I would, while emphasizing that women need to be able to step up and to be empowered to step up is an important consideration. But I think what's important also to consider that it takes both bottom up is this entrepreneurs and startups as well as a top down effort on changing the enabling environment that's not only dealing with female entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship as such. I think what we are trying to address is the policy angle so that there is an enabling environment to whatever projects then will come to fruition. I do love the fact that we're helping women to do this, but I don't want to divert the attention that they have to, all they need to think about is the gender, because I'm afraid that this is going to divert attention from what to take. It's hands on, all hands on deck, honestly. everybody counts. So for me, this is just like dealing with your internal hesitation. If there is any hesitation, it's like all of us have said in this event, come and be part of the journey, be a part of this transformation. Without you, it's not going to happen. And if you want to influence how the future will look like, you have to be at the table. You have to be the part of the conversation. Without you, you will have to continue to live in a world that's dominated by the values that perhaps are not your own.
Yeah.
And so it's taken, everybody needs to be part of the transformation. Time is running out. Everybody has to recognize the intrinsic value that they bring to this. And I would challenge them to bring up the best and be willing to step up and be comfortable with the uncomfortable of being in a game.
Thank you.
Because
Then
I
now
think
we're already.
what reminds me, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We have to all get into the kitchen.
Yes. Yes, and this is great because we're already moving forward into what advice we can give to people who want to be active in this field. So the time is moving along swiftly, I just realized. And in case you're wondering, what am I looking at here? It's because I can't see our chat in the teams that we're meeting in here. So I'm just looking if my colleagues are relaying any of your questions or comments to me. Please feel free to use the chat or to give a sign of hand if you want to ask a question or comment to our valued panelists in our remaining 15 minutes. And whilst I'm looking out for your questions or comments or raised hands, Theresia, maybe you can start sharing a little bit more insight about what should people be looking out for? So I imagine there are quite a number of aspiring female entrepreneurs looking for investment, at least we've had in previous sessions and maybe in the audience here today. So what is the kind of advice that you would give, or what are the things that you look for in terms of investment readiness, or yes, saying to people, okay, you're now ready to be put on our list of initiatives we would suggest to our funders?
Sure. So we are investing in the very, very early stage of companies' development. Angel investors actually do come mostly as really first investors, even before like venture capital funds or then other funds, simply because we identified this as a huge barrier here on the market. That, however, doesn't mean that you just come to us with an idea, like, oh, I just woke up with an idea and I'm thinking. So there should be already an execution. There should be a team and an execution. That doesn't mean you have to have revenues, that you have to earn money with that. We do invest in pre-revenue stage, but there have to be a significant validation. Let's say, you already discussed with one of your large clients, you can be doing a pilot with this client for free, let's say, but you gather the data from this client that are important to you, or you develop a relationship, so you see how your product is actually working, whether it is actually working. So this kind of validation, but as I said, it doesn't have to be earning the money, the product itself. So what we are looking at is first of all, always the team and the people. As I said, if there is no revenues, if there is no product that is finished, it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. I invest in people. All our investors are looking to invest in people. So the most important to me is that who are you? Why are you working on a company on the solution that you are working on? What's your connection to this solution? Have you worked in such a field before? Have you experienced the problem? That's why you're developing the solution. Or what's your experience in this field? Why are you working with people you are working with? Who is the team? We never invest only in a company that has one person in it. Simply because we believe you cannot run the company on your own. Even though you are in an early stage and you don't have the money, to pay the salaries, etc., you can motivate people with other things. People join your company for other things than the money. So we invest in people, in teams. So that's number one, what I'm looking at every time I evaluate the business. And then next comes, of course, the uniqueness product, technology, the platform, software, eShop, whatever you are working on or developing, there must be something special about it, or different than any of your competitors. And then, of course, other aspects that you're looking in every business or business plan. So how big is the market? How you're growing, how are you going to sell your product, where you're going to sell the product, how are you going to finance it, how much is it going to earn, for our investors. So all these things come afterwards. But a team and the product itself are the most important things we're looking at.
So I hope people are taking notes for their little checklist of how to go home and do their homework. Divya, I would love to ask you a similar question. Is there a vetting process that you go through before you add funders to your database? And if so, what is it that you're looking for, or vice versa? If you're looking to connect them with others, is there, some kind of vetting or matching process in between?
Definitely. So, for instance, we work quite closely both with the private sector as well as with financiers, right? So we do have a formal outreach to the downstream financiers where, for instance, I would reach out to Theresia and then kind of try to understand what it is that she looks for in companies, what are her criteria. Like now she said people. So that's what I would look for in the companies that I would then introduce to her. So it's literally a matchmaking process that happens here. And the companies I would introduce are always the companies we've already worked with. We've already provided the technical advisory support for, so that she is more comfortable in investing into this company. So they have their books in order, they have everything in order. When we take a company to a financier. So that's how it happens. And on the funding database itself, we don't go through a very extensive vetting process, but the funding organizations out there, or the financiers out there, are in many cases very well known globally. And if they aren't, then of course it would require at least a first point of contact to check if the details we have are in order or not.
Great. So maybe just to follow up on some of the things you said, and I'll pose this as a general question to all of you. If I understood you all correctly, there's not that much education needed in terms of convincing funders to invest in female businesses. Is that correct in your experience, Divya? If the business model is good and the case is good, or do you think there are still stereotypes or other things where some kind of education or thought exchange is needed to bring down barriers to invest in female-led businesses?
Right, at least in the geographies that we work in, that's Sub-Saharan Africa, Pacific, and Caribbean, and the financiers we work with in these geographies, we understand very well that they also kind of have a top-down push to, in fact, be more open towards women-led or women-managed organizations. So that is coming, and that basically means the bottom-up needs to also start matching it up. So in that sense, if a company, irrespective of who is leading it, if they have their documents in place, and if the founders are able to pitch this to the financiers, there's no reason why they shouldn't be accepted into the financing intake.
Okay. I've just been relayed a question from the chat from Jessica, so I'd like to prioritize this now. It's not addressed to anyone specifically, but you can pick it up accordingly. So I'll read it out. What are some examples of ESG capital equity funds that invest in emerging markets, or where can we reach them? So I guess this goes mainly to Ekaterina or Divya. Should I reread it?
No, I think I'm not working with the private equity funds. This is not my area of expertise to list them. But what I can comment on is the trend, ESG trend in particular. We've been doing a lot of work on understanding how the market has changed, and with regards to sort of sustainability aspects. And ESG has now become one of the key issues that each investor is now accountable to their shareholders, to the asset owners, whether it's an equity fund or whether it's a bond fund. And that's additional check-in requirement. And S, which is social, has gender all over it. So when whether it's investment in a private equity startup or in a public equity companies or any other funds, all of the asset managers or funds have to go through internal process of comparing it against ESG criteria where gender is one of them. So there is what Stevia called as a push from the top. I would even call it's started as a push from the top, as significant pressures from the asset owner, from civil society, from changes in the overall societal pressure for the finance industry to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem, beyond just climate, on the sustainability, on the broader sustainability issues. And so now it's becoming internalized by people below the top. So it originated from the top, but I think a lot of progress has been made in internalizing it and becoming part of the investment decision making across the financial industry. Some institutions are more advanced than others, but I think that process is irreversible. So that's what we're looking at. It's becoming part of the decision making.
Great, thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? I think before we close for a final round of comments for advice, I would...
Sorry, quickly just add to the same question.
Oh, please, go ahead, Divya.
The ESG equity funds. So to whoever asked that question, please look up the GetInvest funding database, because there are, I think, around 37 equity funds on there. Yeah, so Africa Refund, Climate Investor One, Electrify, Energy. I mean, I can name them, but I think what would be better is for you to actually directly access it on the funding database. Just go to GetInvest, find the funding database, and filter it for equity funds. As simple as that.
Perhaps, thank you. That's, of course, the more concrete, the better. And that's a very concrete offer. So perhaps our kind colleagues from GIZ or BE could drop the link in the chat for everybody to go and follow your advice and check it out directly there. So I'll do one more shout out to see if anybody else wants to ask a question and get your valued expert advice. Then would be a great time to open your microphone now. And please feel free to jump right in, because due to technical issues, unfortunately, I can't see you raising your hand or the chat. If there are no more questions for today, then I would love to hear unasked advice. So I would like to ask then, if there are, I know we just sort of skimmed across some aspects of the conversation, but if there's any other pieces of advice that you would like to give to female entrepreneurs, female founders, or other female-led organizations in this field, then it would be great to have one round and perhaps see what those closing pieces of advice coming from you would be. Who would like to start us off?
I can start. Good question. Frequently asked question, never the right answer. I would say everyone, sees it from very, subjective point of view. For me, as an investor, if I'm giving an advice to a female entrepreneur or any entrepreneur, number one would be talk about your business with as many people as possible. Don't say, closed and working on your thing, because to more people you talk to, more, feedback, ideas, connections you get. This is the simplest and the cheapest way to actually, progress. That has always showed us as a good strategy. So just don't be afraid, even though you're in a very early stage, even if you're like just thinking of, exploring other streams or, things, just talk to people about it. Even random people, you never know what they might tell you, who they might know. And number two, as I said, esteem is the most important for me. Whenever you're presenting to an investor, always present yourself first. take those 2-3 minutes to say who you are and why you are there running this particular business, and asking the investor for investment. For us, this is crucial because this actually makes 50% of everything. So instead of starting your business presentation with what you're doing and what amazing product you are launching, take a step back and just say who you are and why you are standing there, and this makes the whole conversation much different.
Wonderful. Very good concrete advice. Thank you very much for that, Theresia. Divya, would you like to go next?
Sure. I would reiterate what Theresia said and add to that, be open to asking for help. We are not building one-man armies here, one-woman armies here. So be open to asking for help, reach out, get the right people to do the right job. So reach out to the right service providers, reach out to Get Invest if you think you fulfill the requirements, or even if you think you don't. We are quite flexible, honestly. And even if you do not fulfill the requirements, we always will be happy to find ways for you to go ahead, to connect you to different people. So reach out, be open to asking for help. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much for that.
And I'll continue to expand this circle of love. Ask for help, not just in terms of job and not in terms of how you present yourself to a funder. Ask for help in life. Figure out what makes you tick. Come up with your personal narrative. Why you're in this space. Build your support network. Bring out the best in you. I think it's what I'm finding. It's not just been perfect in your job, but being comfortable with who you are and figuring out what makes you tick. And that it takes a village. It takes a village and network of like-minded people who hold you accountable for your own goals. Set them. Get somebody who can check you against those goals and that help you keep the progress on. Just keep going, go get them.
Wonderful. Yes, and as you said earlier, everybody's needed at the table. So if you are thinking about becoming active in this area, then don't be shy. This is the time to get involved. And as we heard today, there's also plenty of opportunities around and plenty of investment and funding opportunities around, which is extremely encouraging to hear from all three of you. I'd like to thank you personally for taking the time to be part of Women Energize Women today, and would like to also thank you for your networking readiness in terms of being available also for further conversations, maybe some questions or comments we didn't have time for today, but we'll be happy to help make connections and aid in networking also with our speakers beyond this event. So thanks again so much for your time and for being here today, for everybody who attended the session, and the three of you, Theresia, Divya, and Ekaterina. It was great talking to you. And please do follow us on social media channels. You can find us if you put in Women Energize in Twitter, in LinkedIn, Instagram, and so forth. So we look forward to hearing from you there or seeing you at our next monthly event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.